It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutts. I'm your host, Mainz, and my colleague, a man who has never had stitches, Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Well, I'm not a snitch. And, snitches get stitches, so...
Snitches do get stitches, Dutton. Indeed, indeed. How are we this fine night?
I'm very, very well, sir. Yourself?
I'm good. Nearly as good as Vance Joseph, who sounds like he's going to get the Denver job. I assume he's getting that for his stellar defensive performance against the Pittsburgh Steelers last Sunday.
He must bring exceptional cakes to the interview.
It's like, as you just mentioned to me, it looks like Sean McVay's going to be, who's the offensive coordinator for the Washington professional football team, is going to be getting the Rams job, I assume, based on his stellar performance against the Giants in his last game.
Literally, these people just must interview very, very well.
Yeah, I would guess so. Dutton, we're back. I mean, and this week, although we are going to do games of the week, I've got my team of the week, which last week did me proud. We're going interview heavy, back almost like it's in the off season. We've got 2 interviews this week. We've got a guy that I think we could quite comfortably describe as the best fantasy football player on the planet. That's Marcus Grant, and we'll explain why I think he's the best fantasy football player on the planet when he joins us. We then have the brilliant Jenny Vrentas from Monday Morning Quarterback and SI.com fame to discuss all things NFL. A lot to do with a certain team in New York. Actually, 2 teams in New York, one in the state and one in the city. And we haven't got her on because we know a girl she used to go to school with.
No, not at all. But, if you have these connections, you have to make use of them.
You do. And we'll probably get a chance with Marcus and Jenny to talk about the Rose Bowl, as both of their alma maters were in it. And I know that Marcus went.
On my NCAA football 2013... as my first year as offensive coordinator of the Washington State Cougars, our high-power offense did win the Pac-12 and the Rose Bowl. Despite this, they chose to let the head coach go and promote me.
What I would say is, just for your benefit, no one calls them Washington State; they call them Wazoo. No idea why.
Yeah, I don't call teams by stupid names or noises that it sounds like my one-year-old daughter makes.
Wasn't Noel Edmonds on a kids' TV show called Wazoo in the 70s? Who? What?
That was Tiswas, wasn't it?
I have no idea.
Same horse, different jockey.
Before this descends into absolute carnage, Dutton,
I think it's too late for that.
Let's get Marcus on the phone. Talk to him about his fantasy football season, why I'm close to calling him the greatest fantasy player of 2016, and also to commiserate him on supporting the San Francisco 49ers. And joining us now on Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutts, returning guest, one of our favourites, and for me, the greatest fantasy football player of 2016, and that's Marcus Grant. How are we, Marcus?
I'm good. I'm totally going to save that, and I'm going to take it to all the executives here at NFL.com and NFL Network and see if I can parlay that into some sort of raise or something.
So if for people who are unaware, and I don't know how you are because you must be following Marcus on Twitter, he won the 2016 Experts NFL Draft, so NFL Fantasy. So by definition, as the NFL is the fantasy world, he must be the best person. He beats every other expert, therefore is the best person at fantasy in 2016.
I can't take all the credit. This is a team award. I have to thank guys like Aaron Rodgers and David Johnson and Jordy Nelson and Mike Evans for really contributing and helping build a strong franchise this year and helping bring me to a title.
See, that's the classic, when we win, it's we, but if we lose, it's me. That's a refreshing attitude. I mean, Marcus is... No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I want to be a team, but this is how you attract quality free agents to your franchise, is letting them know that it's really about the unit and not about the individual.
is that the major philosophy that you had, or did you, when you started the season, was that kind of all you'd thought about, or was there a specific strategy that you went with?
No, I didn't have one. I thought that maybe this year was going to be a referendum on the zero RB theory. I know goodness knows, we spent so much time arguing over that. My overarching strategy has always been to not lock into one particular strategy. It's to be kind of flexible and realize that, every draft is kind of different. The draft that I do here at the network with, the guys on the show is different than the draft I do with, some friends from high school and stuff. So it's hard to just commit to one strategy. The only strategy like I had, like I said, was I was taking David Johnson in the first round, when and wherever possible. But beyond that, I was more curious about just kind of targeting a range of guys and seeing who would fall to me in each round.
I mean, it does seem that 2016, as you say, was, a referendum for zero RB. I mean, just looking at it from the outside, just contributing in some small way, did it surprise you how violently people were committed to their side of the argument, whichever it was?
Yes, I guess I shouldn't have been, right? Like, we've all been doing this Twitter thing for a while, so we should all have known better. But yeah, it did catch me off guard. And I think one of the things that we've talked about in, the group that we call the Fantasy Stronghold isn't so much that people didn't necessarily agree with it. Like, I get it. Not every strategy is for every person and what have you. I think what took a lot of us by surprise was that some people were so vehemently against it and not even willing to consider it. I mean, this was a theory that had been tested. It had been, really fleshed out and experimented with over years. This wasn't some sort of, half-cocked theory that just was thrown out there. And so, to maybe not employ it was one thing, but for people to just completely dismiss it out of hand really took me by surprise.
I'm gonna change tack now, and unfortunately, I'm gonna go negative, and that's negative for you. And my question to you is, was that the worst season that you've seen the San Francisco 49ers ever have?
Yes. Yes. And I remember living through the years with Mike Singletary as head coach, and, some of those really bad years where Tim Rattay was the quarterback or Jim Druckenmiller. This was bad. And it's been unnecessarily bad, I think, in a lot of ways. I mean, from the moment they decided to part ways with Jim Harbaugh, it's been all downhill. Nothing has gone right. Player personnel decisions have been bad. The on-field product has been bad. And you have an owner who kind of wants to have his hands in a lot of different things, but so far hasn't shown an ability to be successful as a personnel guy. So, yeah, it was bad this past year. I think the good part for me is that I decided a couple seasons ago to sort of divorce myself emotionally from them. I watch them, I follow them, I keep up with them, but I decided a couple years ago that I just was not going to live and die with every game because I didn't need to be miserable at the end of every Sunday.
I mean, because you can't fire the owner.
As he reminded us, yes.
I mean, obviously, as we're speaking now, there is the coaching and GM search is still going on. So, massive flight of fantasy now. Assume that Mainzy and I are, hot coordinators or college coaches or something. We want you to pitch to us why we should take the 49ers job. You can't just flat out lie, unfortunately.
Okay, so the reason to take the job is because you now have an opportunity to build an offense or a defense in your image. I mean, the cupboard is bare. So this is an opportunity for you to come in and, as Bill Parcells would say, not only do you get to cook the meal, you get to pick the groceries. I mean, you can help rebuild this franchise to its glory. Aside from a few pieces maybe on defense or maybe, Carlos Hyde on offense, there isn't a lot that's already set in stone there. So here's an opportunity for you, especially if it's as a young coordinator, one way or another, to come in, help build a defense, help really build your own reputation, and help return this franchise to its past glory.
Is the example just look at what Philadelphia did last year under Chip Kelly in their first year. That's where you are, and that's where you've got to aim for.
maybe even a better example is just across the bay a handful of years ago, and they had a general manager in Reggie McKenzie who looked like he was on his way out. They had gone through a couple of coaching changes. There wasn't a ton of talent on the roster, but they made some changes. They drafted well. Obviously, it helped getting Amari Cooper a couple years ago, then following that up with the Khalil Mack, Derek Carr draft, really building the pieces. And now, regardless of what happened in the playoffs last week, the Raiders have a good foundation, and they look like they're going to be competitive for a really long time. And I think that, if anything, is probably a good example, if you're 49ers management, of what you can potentially offer somebody.
I mean, they do say, you have to hit rock bottom and acknowledge you've hit rock bottom before you can start climbing back up. If this was the worst season you've seen, excuse me, it must be the worst for quite some time. Well, quite clearly it is. So acknowledge, okay, we can't get any worse. Now the only way is up.
I think the fans have acknowledged that it's rock bottom. I don't know if anybody in the building has acknowledged that it's rock bottom. I guess in theory there's still the potential of a 1-15 or 0-16 season. Thank goodness that the Rams are still around, but even they seem to be kind of getting their act together right now. But I guess in theory it could get worse. But I think as bad as things were, as much turmoil as there's been in this building, and the fact that they will be on their fourth head coach in 4 seasons, I really can't imagine. I think even people in Cleveland look around and say, man, that's really kind of a dumpster fire.
which is something nice for the Cleveland people. If we move from pro to college, I was trying to explain to a group of friends of mine. Can you just explain to people the magic of the Rose Bowl?
Yeah, and here's the thing. I will explain it as it was explained to me. Because growing up in California, the weather's always fairly nice, even in Northern California. And on New Year's Day, we don't have a lot of snow or gray. So I didn't quite understand it until I was sometime in my 20s and was working with a guy from Indiana. And he explained it to me. He said, waking up on New Year's Day in the Midwest, it's cold, it's snowy, it's gray. And then we turn on the TV in the afternoon, and there's this magical place called Pasadena, and the sun is out, and there's all these bright colors, and people are smiling, and nobody is bundled up in layers and layers of clothing. And he said, as a kid, it was amazing, and it was magical. We always wanted to go there. And at that point, like I said, I was in my 20s, maybe mid to late 20s. It suddenly hit me, and I understood why the Rose Bowl was such a big deal. And then on top of it, you get games like we had, just a couple of weeks ago. That makes it even more special.
So I believe you were at that game, right?
I was. Mm-hmm. My dad and I went to that game together. Yep.
So I suppose the only question for me is, who's going to suck for Sam Darnold in? I believe it'll be 2 years, right?
I don't want to think about that. Can we? I just want to enjoy Sam Darnold for the next 2 years.
So I guess from a USC point of view, since Pete left, there's been a lot of false dawns. Although they have had half a roster that they couldn't pick because they weren't allowed the scholarships. But this year, there was big things expected, never quite materialised at the start of the season. Obviously, it doesn't help that you play Bama week 1. Obviously. They then win, I think, their last 9 games, maybe even 10 games, including the Rose Bowl. Are we now thinking, okay, this is a number 2, 3 team in the country for next season's preseason poll, and the hype train is well and truly back in LA and in USC?
Oh, but the hype train has left the station. Yeah, that left the station like a month ago, and it is steaming down the tracks. I tend to be a skeptic about this sort of thing. I know they're going to lose a lot of talent. Juju Smith has already declared that Dory Jackson is expected to be gone. They're going to have to kind of replace a lot of the wide receivers there. There's some guys on the defensive side that they're going to have to replace. But I think what we saw is that, there's still a lot of talent. And Sam Darnold made a huge difference for this team down the stretch of the season. And I think, not having the scholarship limitations anymore, being able to recruit a full complement of talent, I think is going to be a big deal. And I think part of what will help make them successful is sort of what Pete Carroll did, in the sense that he decided, that he was obviously in Southern California where there's a wealth of high school talent, and he made it a priority to get the guys he wanted. That he felt like USC, with its tradition and its history and its resources, should have first pick of a lot of those kids. And I think that you're going to start to see that again, where the program is going to try and build mostly locally. And then as they start to get rolling again, then you can start to go out to other places. You can go to Florida or Texas or Ohio and start to bring in some of that talent. But I think the reason people are excited again is because it looks like the rebuilding process is starting at home and getting those local kids to stay in and play at SC.
See, I saw. I know mock drafts aren't really that worth the paper they're written on at this point, but I saw one the other week. I can't remember the name, but against the Philadelphia Eagles, I saw wide receiver USC, and bear in mind how successful the last wide receiver from USC that the Eagles took. I don't think I'd be particularly happy about that selection.
I think he's talented. I think he's a really good college receiver. I think if you are drafting him expecting he's going to be a big game breaker at the pro level, I think you are going to be disappointed, because I don't know that he's that guy. He doesn't have great breakaway speed. I think he's going to have to get a little bit stronger, but he could potentially be a nice role player. I don't think he's what the Eagles want or need out of their receiving core. I mean, I think they need a guy who can be a big-time playmaker. Nelson Aguilar hasn't worked out the way, obviously, they thought he would. Jordan Matthews is a nice player, but he's not a standout player or anything of that nature. So I don't know that adding Juju is going to suddenly make this an explosive offense the way they want it to be. I think he's more of a complimentary guy who goes to a team that doesn't have an immediate need at wide receiver.
Someone who can catch would help the Eagles. Just that simple. Just someone who can actually catch the ball.
You and your high expectations for wide receivers.
I know. I just set myself up for a huge fall.
Marcus, as always, thank you for your time. Apologies, and we'll peek behind the curtain for the internet issues I'm having. But thank you for your time, and we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, man. I always appreciate coming on, guys. Let's keep the Russians out of hacking fantasy football.
Well done. That was the brilliant Marcus Grant. Hopefully, people will hear it. I've got a lot of editing to do, I think, due to many issues with my internet tonight due to an incoming snowstorm.
It's always a pleasure to speak to Marcus from a general point of view, because obviously he's the top bloke. But to get a chance for him to come down from the heights of fantasy football to speak to mere peons like us it's a real honour.
It is, and as always, it's great to speak to Marcus, and hopefully next time we'll be able to do it a lot more easily.
Well, that's a you problem.
Yeah, it certainly is. So, Dalton, I mean, we've done a great interview with Marcus, but let's get down to the business end of things. We are in the best weekend of the NFL season, according to some, although not us, obviously, as our teams aren't involved. But let's get on and talk about the games of the week.
The games of the week.
Touchdown, 85-yard! He's going to score! He's going to score! He's going to score! Touchdown!
First game, Dalton, is Seahawks at Falcons. Sneaky good game. I suppose the first question I've got is, with the likes of Taylor Gabriel, Julio Jones, how big a loss is Earl Thomas this week?
I think it's a huge loss. You see, the Seahawks haven't an interception in 5 games since Thomas went out. So we saw I think it was week 6, the Seahawks were able to make plays against the Seahawks with Thomas. So without him, they're going to have the work out for them, I think.
I suppose if I look at it and I just think he's their best player. We all the talk is always on Richard Sherman, and rightfully so, because he talks a lot, and people like him because he talks a lot. Although he only likes people like us, not media people. Mm-hmm. But Earl Thomas is the glue that is the straw that stirred the drink, so to speak, in that backfield, and he's still got really good players. But that ball that goes deep over the middle now, there's a more chance that Julio is going to catch it or Taylor Gabriel is going to catch it. Do you know what I mean? That I think Kyle Shanahan may be licking his chops for the first time ever in a Seattle matchup.
Very likely. But if we should remember that the last time these two teams did meet in the playoffs, Atlanta won.
And it was an exceptional game, Dutton. In terms of, from a Falcons point of view, for them to win this game, they're at home, obviously. But are we saying that for them to win, Vic Beasley has got to have a massive game, maybe 2 or 3 sacks on Russell Wilson?
Well, Beasley is their best defender. I mean, their defence hasn't been good. It's not a shutdown defence by any stretch of the imagination. They're lucky in a sense that their offence has been so good, so they could keep scoring because they certainly can't stop anyone. So, I mean, this Seattle offensive line, as we know, is terrible. So if Wilson should be in for a very long day.
I just look at it, and I think Colts under Manning, that's what the Falcons need to be. And that means on defence, you got to make a couple of plays and make a couple of stops. Because as you said, you're not going to stop them every time. But you've got to hope that your offence scores more than theirs does. To do that, you need maybe a couple of turnovers and a couple of 3-and-outs. And I think that's where Beasley should come into his own. It's running game. It's strength on strength in running game versus running game. Who's got the advantage this week?
Well, I think the advantage is the Falcons because they've got more effective people who can run the ball. I mean, Thomas Rawls had an excellent game against the Lions. He ripped them to pieces. But take him away, which, obviously is easier said than done, but, let's take him away. What else have you got? Alex Collins. I thought they were great in Dynasty, but, they're not that good an NFL running back. Whereas the Falcons, you go from Devonta Freeman to Tevin Coleman. You can throw in a bit of Taylor Gabriel in the ground game as well. So I just think the Falcons' offense is more multifaceted and is more consistent.
I think that's a good point to make. Don't is that from a running point of view, you always, off the top of your head, you're always going to say Seattle can run the ball. They've got so many injuries. Although Thomas Rawls is a good player, that if he has to, as you said, Dynasty was a TV show in the 80s, by the way, for people under the age of 40. Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman have been excellent, and we rave about Kyle Shanahan's running offense. Let's not stop now. So, I mean, let's get straight to it, Dutton. It's Seahawks at Falcons. The over-under's 51. Who you got?
I've got the Falcons, and I will take the. I'll just go over.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Falcons in the over. Although it's one of them. The Seahawks are playoff tested, so don't be surprised if they win the game. That would be my take on it.
Wouldn't stun me.
No, it wouldn't stun me at all. Although if Falcons win, like Kyle Shanahan's may add an extra zero onto his head coaching opportunity money. Next game,
shame he can't add an opportunity though.
Well, yeah, I wonder if Mike's put him off, or put other teams off him. Sorry. Next game, Dutton, is the worst of the bunch, and luckily for people of the UK, it's on at 1:30 in the morning, and that's Texans at Patriots. I think it's just a basic question, Dutton. I know they scored, 27 last week, but how did the Texans score points this week?
If anyone who watched that game will tell you that despite that was Brock's best game of the year, by any competent starting NFL quarterback, it was crap. It was awful. If that's your high point, Jesus wept. I mean, they're going to make the Patriots will make the field smaller, but you don't really have to make it much smaller for Brock because he won't throw outside. So ultimately, it's going to be okay. Run on us. Lamar Miller is not playing well. He's not getting the help, and the outside receivers aren't getting fed. So there's no chance. The Texans have got no chance.
And it's this is the quote unquote second round of the playoffs, and I'm with you. They've got absolutely no chance. And I'm not sure how they score points. As you said, Brock isn't going to beat them in the air. I know that he's not a rookie quarterback, but he is. And we all know what Belichick does to rookie quarterbacks. They can't get anyone open apart from Fedora Warowitz. And even he's not going to get open this week, I don't think. Can they run the ball? Well, no, probably not. This has got massacre written all over it. And for people who are staying up till 1:30, luckily by 2:00, you'll know the game's over. So on
best of luck.
Oh yeah, good best. I will definitely be asleep and be watching it in the morning. I suppose the question I've got, Dutton, is from a New England side, is it a Brady game or a Legarrette Blount game?
I'm going to be, a wishy-washy and say both. I think they'll come out passing, be aggressive, put it in Brady in the first half, and then they'll just kill it. They'll put, give it to let Blount run out the clock. In the second half, basically make the game shorter. So basically, they're trying to make the game smaller and make the game shorter. They'll just grind them into the dirt.
See, I see this game very similar to Steelers-Dolphins last week, where when it started the game, oh look, Big Ben's throwing everywhere. He's thrown 2 touchdowns to Antonio Brown, blink of an eye. Next minute, you've got Le'Veon Bell just pound and 160 yards and a couple of scores, and that's what I see from Blount this week. Brady will start hot, but then he won't need to do any more, and they'll just keep on handing it off to Blount, and that will be the points that they'll rack up. So from a fantasy point of view, if you want, I'd definitely go Blount, because I think he's going to get a lot of touches, especially, late second and all of the third quarter. Your issue may be, is he going to get a rest in the fourth?
Blunt's record, especially when it comes to touchdowns in games where the Patriots are 10-point or more favourites, is quite phenomenal. But you say, Brady will start quick, just like Roethlisberger did. Again, let's not pussyfoot around last week. Ben Roethlisberger did not play well.
No,
and hasn't played well for about a month.
No, he didn't, and don't be spoiling some questions that we're going to have in about 2 minutes. But yeah, I know what you're saying. I've got another question, but I don't want to talk about Texans Patriots anymore, and it's actually a future question that we can talk about on the off season. So Texans at Patriots.
You big tease.
Over-unders 44.5. That's right.
I'm going to take the Patriots in the under, because I don't see the Patriots scoring 45.
That's the issue on the over-under, isn't it? You think 35-10, but can the Texans score 10? Maybe not. I'm going to take the Patriots. Obviously, I'm going to take the under as well, because I'm not sure he can do that. The aforementioned Ben Roethlisberger is playing in first game on Sunday. That's Steelers at the Chiefs. Let's be honest, Dutton, is this the sneaky best game of the weekend?
I think so. The Steelers defense, it's very good at sacking people, but if you go back to certainly the time I've been watching the NFL, Blitzburg, you'd hope they would be. But the defense got shredded by Matt Moore. So one of the staples of the West Coast offense, as we know, is you script the first 15 plays of the game. Do you not think Andy Reid knows exactly what plays he wants to do to get ahead against the Steelers? To really exploit these matchups. They say the limited offense of the Chiefs. It's got more weapons than you think. So get ahead, and then in the second half, go what the Patriots do. Give it to Spencer Ware, give it to Charkandrick West, and say, go on, Ben has to beat us, because we're not going to let Bell do it.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And what's weirdly underrated about Alex Smith is that Alex Smith in the playoffs and Alex Smith in the regular season can be quite different. I.e., in the postseason, he seems to throw it all over the yard at least once a year, get 35, 40 points. Is that this week? I don't know. I mean, the Steelers hit people really hard on defence last week. Illegally a couple of times for me. But don't worry though, if you slap someone in the face with your hand, that's the same amount of penalty. He's trying to kill someone like he's a moving target. I just look at it and think, can the Chiefs run the ball? And if not, can they get Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce open? I'm not too sure. I mean,
Dupree's hit on Matt Moore gets the same penalty as Jay Ajayi pushing a person in the face to defend it. The other week, in fact, I think it was earlier this week, a man in Baltimore was involved in a 3-hour standoff with the police because he fired a gun at his wife and daughter because someone took a bite out of his grilled cheese sandwich. That's a similar situation in the sense that, no, one of these things is clearly worse than the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You've mentioned concern around Big Ben. Should that concern continue, especially this week as he's on the road? And we've already discussed multiple times this season how his home road splits are unbelievable.
It's phenomenal how poorly he plays on the road. And it's not just a case of, he averages, a little bit less, a little bit. No, he's terrible on the road. The Chiefs' defence it's a ball-hawking defence. They're very opportunistic. Bob Sutton, quietly decent job. Was defensive coordinator there. He's been there for a few since Reid has taken over. But they've got weapons on defence. You can't just say, well, we're not going to throw to Marcus Peters aside. Unfortunately, the game of football doesn't work that way. The Steelers' offensive line is very good, so they're going to have to protect Roethlisberger. But ultimately, he holds onto the ball too long, and it's going to get bloody loud in Arrowhead, as we know. So I think the Chiefs I can see the Chiefs winning this at a canter.
I think the thing about the Chiefs defense is it takes the ball away. That's how Andy Reid has built his team. Don't give the ball away on offense. Take the ball on defense. And
bend don't break.
Yeah, and with the likes of Berry and Peters, Justin Houston off the edge, Dontari Poe, whether he's throwing balls or running people over in the defensive line, they've got playmakers on defense. And if Ben plays as badly as he has done in periods this season, I think you could be right on. I think that there's a chance that the Chiefs could walk away with this one.
Absolutely. I mean, their record over the last 2 seasons is as good, if not better, than anyone's in football. All up, they're a bloody good team. They're not flashy. They're not full of, hey, look at me players. They are good football players, exceptionally well coached by a man with a quietly underrated coaching tree.
Well, yeah, we looked at that today, and it is, as you said, a lot of players, and a new one, Sean McDermott, just joined the fold as a head coach of the Buffalo Bills, which we will talk about.
I thought he was great in Happy Days, though.
He was excellent, and he was. I suppose the last question is, the run to the number 2 seed involved big-time plays and big-time games from Travis Kelce. Do you see that transferring into the postseason?
Well, it's tough to say. I mean, the Steelers' linebacking core is fast, it's aggressive. So obviously, Kelce is big, he's strong, but he's not the fastest. So it may be a case of he'll play his part, but I wouldn't be surprised if that basically this game hinges on what they can do on the ground. Because as we've said, and I'll keep saying, this Steelers front is not very good against running backs. They're very accommodating. They just don't give up huge runs, but they give up chunk runs. And how they use Tyreek Hill. So I think Kelce will be, it'd be stupid to ignore him completely, but the Steelers are quite good against the tight end.
So it's Steelers at Chiefs, Dutton, and the over-under's 44.5.
Well, I'm going with the Chiefs, and 44.5. I'll take the under.
Okay,
because the highest score, I think, but if it's a shootout, you've got to back I think you back the Steelers even on the road. But if it's a dogfight, I'll take the Chiefs.
I don't know why, but I hear what you're saying, and for a similar reason I'm going to do in the next game. I just see momentum. I'm going to take the Steelers and the over, but I think it will be a shootout, and I do think there'll be a lot of points. I don't, defense fans stay at home, so to speak. I don't think you'll be seeing much in this game. Final game, Dutton, is stellar in terms of names. It's Packers at Cowboys. And I suppose for the Cowboys, it's a simple question. Do the rookies live up to all the hype?
I think an awful lot of this comes down to how the Packers start. We've talked before about, deferring or taking the kickoff. I think the Packers need the ball first, to score first, and then say to Dak, okay, playoffs, this is a different ball game. Over to you. But we've seen that the Green Bay defensive front is not very good. So if they can get Ezekiel Elliott rolling and limit what Dak Prescott has to do, make the game shorter, the best way for the Cowboys to win this game is if Aaron Rodgers is sat on the sideline with a cap on, sipping Gatorade. They need to make the game as short as possible and keep him off the field for as long as possible.
Absolutely, I totally agree. You win a toss, you receive, you drive 80 yards in like 7.5, 8 minutes, you score a touchdown. You then somehow get a 3 and out because they're rusty. You're back on the field again, slow again, into the end zone. We're now, there's only 8 minutes left in the second quarter and it's 14-0 and the Packers haven't had the ball yet.
The Packers can't afford to do what they did in Seattle in 2014, where they drove the ball twice down to the goal line and came away with 6 points. McCarthy has to be clinical in his play calling.
Yeah. So, in almost an answer to that, do you just try and contain Aaron Rodgers, i.e. keep him off the field and let him have as few possessions as possible to win the game?
It has to be. If Aaron Rodgers has 40 pass attempts in this game, you will lose it. Especially the form he's in. The Cowboys' defense is not that good on paper. It's very well planned and schemed. The best way to ensure he can't beat you is if he isn't on the field. So, if if the Cowboys have to have 2 13-minute drives to win the game, that's what they're going to have to do, because they can't afford to take the chance that Aaron Rodgers does something Aaron Rodgers-y.
Like, if you watched that game last week and you went to bed at, I don't know, 11 o'clock, and then you woke up at like 6:30 and someone said, oh, the Packers won that game 38-13, you'd be like, pardon? Like, how is that even possible? And then you watch the game and you're like, oh, it's possible because there's an alien who can't be touched and can throw from any position, like he's shooting out of a cannon, and he's found, and Randall Cobb's alive again, you know. And this is the issue for the Cowboys: how do you keep him quiet? If Cobb has another game like that, and you've got Rodgers and you've got the starters of weapons, it's like, nah, this isn't going to work, Dallas. It's not.
I mean, the Cowboys were not good against the tight end. So the likes of Jared Cook, who had a decent game last week, Randall Cobb works the middle of the field, so I know he's not a tight end, but he works out the slot. They're going to be in trouble if they... Put it this way, they're going to have to hit Rodgers hard, early and often, and they haven't got the pass rush to do that. So the magic and the form, it's the Packers for me. The number 1 seed, be damned.
I suppose the last question I've got before we pick the games up is: do you think Des Bryant will actually catch it this time?
Why should he? You know, I don't think anyone's really mentioned the last time these two teams met in the playoffs, so I don't think anyone's really bothered.
I mean, I'm not, and I'm sure Des isn't, and I'm sure ESPN and NFL Network and CBS and Fox and whoever, anybody else, Sky won't mention it once on Sunday.
I mean, do you know how we know it was an incomplete pass? Because
I'll check the book, right?
Yeah, the Packers played the week after the Cowboys didn't.
Exactly, pretty straightforward. Packers at Cowboys, Dutton, over-under is 52, biggest of the weekend.
I'm going to take the Packers, the only road team I believe I've gone for, and I'm going to take the under, because I think the Packers will score points, but I can't see the Cowboys. The Cowboys are not built to play in shootouts. And I think if they try to, they will end up turning the ball over more often than they want to. So, yeah. Packers and under.
I'm going to take the Packers in the under as well. I agree with you. I don't see the Cowboys wanting to get involved in a shootout. I don't think that's good for them. So, Packers at Cowboys, which leads on to we're saying, Dutton, then, I believe, Chiefs at Patriots. You're saying, I'm saying Steelers at Patriots. And then we've got... Packers at Falcons.
Yep.
Not bad. So that's our games of the week. But as we've talked about, a lot of coaching changes going on, a lot of things happening in the NFL. So we thought, let's get an expert to help us talk about them. No better expert than Jenny Vrentas from Monday Morning Quarterback. So let's get her on the line and see what she's got to say. And joining us now on Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutts, it's a brilliant Jenny Vrentas from Monday Morning Quarterback and SI.com. Jenny, how are we today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
No worries. Straight into it. No, you're busy with the divisional rounds coming up. You did a brilliant piece at the start of the week, and as everyone's been talking about, Odell Beckham Jr. and him having to grow up. Has he been given more road, do you think, because of the obvious talent? And we're seeing that the Giants have got a little bored with his antics on and off the field, I guess. And they're saying that's enough now, Odell. Back to business.
Yeah, I think, Monday was kind of a total change in their approach with him, I think. For the team's general manager, Jerry Reese, to publicly kind of call him out for his behavior and say that he needs to grow up. Obviously Jerry Reese isn't saying anything publicly that he hasn't said privately already to Beckham, and they had met that morning. And, it's just, I think the issue of, it goes beyond just like the normal competitive fire you see with players. And, people will say with Beckham, like, he's not hurting anyone, he's not acting maliciously. And those things are true. It's not like, you're trying to rein in a player who, or handle a player who's committed crimes or serious things like that. But, if he's your best player on your football team and you're trying to win football games, certainly you want him to be able to channel his emotions in a healthier and more productive way. And I think this season, there were a lot of examples where his emotions got the best of him. And and that had happened a little bit last year, and, they make the coaching change. Tom Coughlin's out, and they promote Ben McAdoo, and they went into this year kind of hoping for a different outcome. And, I think there were times when Beckham on the field, did a little bit better job than he had in the past of handling, the needling by defensive backs. We didn't see any on-field, Josh Norman, Beckham kind of meltdowns like we saw last year. But, pushing the kicking net, and then, after the playoff game, banging his head into the wall, as ESPN reported, and then punching the hole in the wall. Those were just two kind of, the most recent, very significant examples of, him having this kind of off-field rage issue. And so I think the most important thing they could have done for this offseason was to have this conversation with him. And, like I said before, he's their most talented player, so they've got to rein that in a little bit.
I'm not an expert on college football. Well, I'm not really an expert on actual football either. Well, I'm being brutally honest, Jenny. But Beckham came from LSU with Jarvis Landry and Jalen Mills, the rookie cornerback from the Philadelphia Eagles. All of them seem to have this very, very, very strong competitive edge. Is it possible this is a culture thing they've picked up from college that has come through into the pros, or is it literally I'm just picking three isolated examples to try and create some kind of false narrative for myself?
No, that's a good question, and I honestly don't know the answer to that. I was in the Giants locker room on Monday, and I asked some people, where do you think the rage comes from? And, no one seems to have a clear answer for it. And I don't know how related it is for those three players. I think it's a valid point. I wish I had a better answer for you. But I think part of it with Beckham is getting to the heart of where this comes from. He both parents were involved in his life. He went to the same high school as Eli Manning 10 years or so later. He goes to a major college football program. He's a first-round draft pick. So things have gone well in his life. Is that why maybe? Or, are there other things that we don't know about that have contributed to that? I think it would certainly benefit him to meet with, a sports psychologist, because he's got to get to the root of where the issues are coming from, certainly.
After reading your articles about the Buffalo Bills, and especially seeing the Black Monday press conference, which was, hands down the best comedy you'll see all year, has it come across that Terry Pegula is actually more powerful than people probably realised when it came to focusing on the Bills organisation?
Yeah, I think what's hard about the Bills is we're not sure exactly what kind of owners they are. I mean, they're relatively new owners in the NFL. Obviously, they also own an NHL team. But not too much is known about what they're looking for, their ideas on building a winning culture. I mean, perhaps that's partly because they are pretty private. At least Terry Pegula is a pretty private guy, I think. But, there's just not a clear picture of the direction that they want to go in. So I think, all season long, we've kind of been guessing as to what the next step for the Bills would be. And momentum certainly toward the end of the year is pointing to Rex being out. But, the decisions of what goes into that, what are they looking for in a coach? They gave Rex Ryan a 5-year deal. So to bail after 2 years, it's a pretty strong statement, right? So, and then I think what came out of that press conference was, there isn't a clear picture of what ownership wants, what direction they want to take the team in, what the organizational structure should be. All of that was left up in the air. Now, Sean McDermott, I think, is an interesting hire. He's obviously got experience coaching under Andy Reid and Ron Rivera, and I think he's well respected by his players. He brings a lot of that to the job. But, I'm sure in the interview process he asked a lot of tough questions about what the structure of the organization is and what the direction is. Because I think a lot of people from the past regime and previous regimes left the building feeling like, Doug Marrone opted out of his contract, right? Rex Ryan's fired after 2 years, and I think a lot of people, them and on their staff, are leaving the organization feeling like they didn't know what the direction of the organization was supposed to be. So maybe that could change, but as it stands right now, I mean, that's a pretty big question to have for a team, you know?
I mean, does it surprise you that, I mean, by all accounts, once Rex had gone, it was assumed that this was going to be Anthony Lynn's job. It ticked all the boxes. You know, he'd already come out and, you know, he'd been the front voice for the owners and Doug Whaley, because he said it was a business decision not to play Tyrod Taylor. Do you think maybe is it a case of Sean McDermott came in and absolutely wowed them, or is it a case of they decided Lynn is still a little bit too close to the Rex Ryan Bills that they just don't want any piece of anymore?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. You know, I think McDermott had an impressive interview, and they really liked him when they met with him. But I also know that they really like Anthony Lynn, and they've gotten to know him well over the last 2 years, and I think they believed he would be a good leader for an organization. And certainly, you know, you hear reports back that in some of the other interviews, you know, that Anthony Lynn has done, meeting with 3 other teams, you know, he's impressed those teams in interviews as well. So I think he is a guy that comes across well. So I think it's a combination. They both like McDermott, but it does seem like they are trying to do as much as they can to kind of distance themselves from the outcome of the Rex Ryan regime. And, you know, I thought going into Week 17, it sounded like this was going to be his job. And then I had heard the day after the season ended that they had really committed to opening it up, and they weren't so sure anymore. And I don't think that's anything he did. I just think, you know, at that point in the year, I think they just said, I think it was a distancing from the Rex Ryan regime and his staff. And, you know, I think perhaps they didn't, you know, they didn't know if everyone in the locker room, you know, would they be okay with a holdover from the staff, even though they really respected Lynn, or would it be best to just start fresh? And I think it was as much a decision for McDermott as it was to start fresh, which is probably not fair from Anthony Lynn, who's an excellent coach and I think would have done well there.
It just came up on my phone, Jenny. I'm a Washington fan, and it seems that Sean McVay has been appointed coach of the LA Rams. I believe that makes him like the youngest coach ever. I think he's 30. I think he's a year younger than Kiffin was when he took over the Raiders. Do you know much about McVay, and do you expect him to succeed in LA, given the fact that they really have struggled on offense in the past, well, since Fisher's been there, I guess?
Yeah, you know, I just know what I've heard from other people. They think he's a really sharp guy, one of these coaching grinders, you know, who's committed to, you know, staying in his office late and figuring out breaking down tape and coming up with new creative ways to play offense. I mean, that's a reputation he has. I think you're right. I mean, the age thing is certainly an interesting question, because the biggest jump in the NFL is from coordinator to head coach, right? Can you go from being a good, smart X's and O's guy who focuses on one side of the ball to becoming the CEO of a team? So I think the Rams were committed to finding someone who, you know, that they felt they could like grow with, someone who was a younger person who would bring a fresh perspective. I don't think they wanted a retread. I think they wanted a first-time head coach, but certainly picking a 31-year-old is a very extreme move, and it's so hard to know. And I don't even know if these candidates know, and their coordinators interviewing for jobs, I don't think they know, you know, what they don't know. I mean, I think they come in with a great plan. They present a staff that can support them in a lot of areas. But a lot of times it isn't until you actually get in the job where you realize, like, well, maybe I had a shortcoming in this area that I need to work on. And, you know, maybe I should have hired this on my staff differently. And I think that jump is certainly more abrupt at age 31 than it would be you know, having had more experience in business. That doesn't mean he won't be a great head coach. You know, like I said, you hear a lot of positive things about him from other players and coaches in the league, but it is definitely a gamble.
I mean, it's not like he's hiding in a far-flung place like, I don't know, Jacksonville or even Buffalo. He's in the second largest media market in the country with a team that's going to move into a brand new stadium in 2 years. He's got last year's number 1 draft pick, which I assume would have been the first, second and last question in his interview is, how do you fix Jared Goff? And I assume, based on who they've interviewed, Sean must have answered that better than anybody else.
Yeah, I think that's always an important question when you have a player like that you're committed to, or I mean, certainly they gave up a lot in the draft to get him, and they don't have a lot of remaining draft capital as a result of that. The LA job overall, has less draft picks, less money to spend than a lot of other jobs. So it's very important for them to get a coach who they felt like could work with what they have on the roster. And when the Dolphins hired Adam Gase a year ago, a huge reason was they believed that he was the guy that could get Ryan Tannehill back on track. So certainly, I think you're dead on. They're hiring McVay with the idea that he's a guy they think will be very good for Jared Goff. He wants to work with Goff. He thinks he can bring out the best in him. But yeah, that's a very high profile job, and there's a lot of pressure to win. I mean, now there's going to be, as it stands right now, at least it's 2 teams in LA, and neither of them has had success in recent years. And, to support 2 teams in LA and have the stadium project coming down the line, there's a lot of pressure there to have a team that people want to watch.
And just my last question, Jenny. Vance Joseph gave his introductory press conference today, and one of the questions he was asked was, did he plan on calling plays on defense? And he said, hopefully not. I think that comes back to what you said about head coaches, maybe, especially like young head coaches like McVay, becoming more of a CEO rather than a head coach. McVay has come. I mean, I'm pretty certain Jay Gruden called the offense in Washington, so we're seeing more offensive players, offensive coaches becoming head coaches, like Doug Peterson for the Eagles, who've never called plays but are now head coach. Is there a worry that not a worry, but is it now this thing that not particularly experienced at the highest level of the job he was at, but has just come across that he may have skills that make him better for the next level rather than the level he was actually at?
Yeah, it's a good question, because we hear, you wonder a lot of times, like, how a head coach is going to split his duties. And there are a lot of head coaches who like to call the plays. And for them, that works, right? Like, Mike McCarthy, he took a step back, stopped calling the plays, and it didn't work. So then he got right back into it, right? Adam Gase does well calling the plays in Miami. So for some coaches, that works. But there's a lot of coaches who, if you want a team-wide, look at things like Bill Belichick does, the way he does it, you have to really like the way that works, because then you can be involved with every aspect of the team and not feel like you're so tied to one side. So, being a good head play caller doesn't mean you're going to be a good head coach. And at the same token, if you've never taken on play calling responsibilities, it's kind of a gamble if you're going to be good at that. So I really liked what Vance Joseph said. He's, coming into Denver. He's following an experienced head coach, 2 experienced head coaches. Their last 2 head coaches, John Fox and Kubiak, were both experienced head coaches. So he comes in and says he'd prefer not to call the plays. I think that's a great sign of him viewing the job as overseeing the overall thing and worried more about being the CEO, which I think is what Denver probably wants in that position. Now, like you said with McVay, not sure exactly what he's doing, but he's going to do, but I think he would probably want to call the play. So, yeah, it's different styles, and, again, it's this projection you're making when you pick a guy for a head coach, and different teams have different preferences, and certainly it works both ways. And I think, there's different reasons, and it depends a lot on both the players and the coach, what's best for their situation.
Final question before let you go, Jenny, and it's more as a fan, I guess. And that's, first of all, sorry for your loss in the Rose Bowl. We know your alma mater is Penn State. When we spoke last time, Penn State was in a bit of disarray. Now, back on the big stage, playing really well. Still got Ohio State and Penn State to get over, but do you have high hopes for 2017-2018 for the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, this season was really a surprise. I did not expect it to go as well as it did, especially, when they started off the year 2-2. So, even though they lost in the Rose Bowl, obviously it was a close loss. It could have gone either way, just kind of a bad decision there at the end. But I left that game saying, okay, next year they're going to be really good and continue to move forward. I think, there were a lot of skeptics around James Franklin, and I was one too. I wasn't, sure the kind of coach he would be, but I think he did a fantastic job this season. And, this was a really unexpected surprise, and you kind of have to like the direction the team's headed in. So yeah, it was a pretty exciting year.
Fantastic, Jenny. Well, thanks a lot for your time as always, and we will let you go back to your day job.
No, thanks for having me on. I always appreciate it, guys.
The brilliant Jenny Vrentas there, Dalton, and on the fly, able to talk to us about Washington losing their offensive coordinator.
It's remarkable the age we live in, that we have, we don't have, ticker tape in our house, we don't have an AP wire, but we do have Twitter and push notifications. So it's a wonderful world we live in, isn't it?
It's also a wonderful world to think that Sean McVay is probably going to get paid $5 million a year and is 5 years younger than we are, and is now in charge of an NFL franchise in the second biggest media market in the country. It's
comforting that there is someone with that much power, that much profile, that I could literally say, boy.
Exactly.
And demand respect given my age.
Exactly, yeah, given your increasing age. So, 2 interviews, games of the week done. There's only one way to finish it. Let's give everyone our daily fantasy teams of the week.
Mainz and Dutts, daily fantasy team of the week.
Show me the money. Show me the money indeed. Dutton nailed it last week. Lots of money, 2 head-to-head victories, and placed in one of the big 47,000 entries one. So Mainz is on fire. You're going to do the playoff challenge again. I assume your team has barely changed from last week.
My team would be unchanged. However, as Jordy Nelson is questionable, despite having
with death.
Yeah, despite having no ribs, a lacerated spleen, and probably thinks he's still in high school. I've taken Hill out and put in Tyreek Hill. So my whole team, apart from Tyreek Hill, is on a double bonus. So just to reiterate, my team is Aaron Rodgers, Le'Veon Bell, LeGarrette Blount, Tyreek Hill, Julian Edelman, Martellus Bennett, Stephen Gostkowski, and the New England Patriots defense.
New England Patriots defense winning. So I've gone DFS again. As I said, good week last week. Hoping to continue that momentum, although it's a completely different team and there's no momentum whatsoever.
You're an idiot.
Thanks. Quarterback, $6,900. It's Russell Wilson. Expecting a bit of a shootout in Atlanta, and Russell throws a couple of touchdowns, maybe runs in one. Running back one, Dutton. We mentioned him before, LeGarrette Blount. 5,800. Pound the rock will happen a lot middle to late in that game, as it'll be a complete and utter blowout. Running back 2 is Thomas Rawls. Picked this thinking maybe the Seahawks keep it closer than people might expect. Rawls is the only real running back in Seattle, so I expect him to do really well. Wide receiver 1 for me, Dutton, is Cole Beasley. He's $5,000. He's basically been Dak's binky, and I expect them lots of throws. We talked before, they need to keep the Packers off the field, so there'll be a lot of dink and dunk, which they've done most of the year anyway, but moving the chains kind of things. This is obviously PPR, lots of touches for Cole Beasley. Wide receiver 2 in the same game, Randall Cobb, brilliant last week. Woke up from his 18-month slumber. Hope it continues with Jordy Nelson out, as you said, with him being questionable, with 2 broken ribs, a lacerated spleen, and a punctured lung. Blows my mind, by the way. I expect Cobb questionable to see if he'd play in 6 months. I expect Randall Cobb to get a lot of the ball and get in the end zone as well. Flyer for wide receiver 3 on DeAndre Hopkins. Will he get?
You had no money.
I had no. Well, he's more expensive than you think. It worked out that way. I think he might score a touchdown this week. It will be the only touchdown, and I need him to catch 6 balls as well, and then we're okay.
Can I say, if he scores a touchdown, it will be at the end of a pass thrown by Lamar Miller?
But I don't care who throws it. I just need I just need DeAndre to catch it. Tight end is Travis Kelce. We mentioned the shootout in Kansas City, or I did. If there's a shootout in Kansas City, lots of touches for Kelce, and hopefully one, if not two, scores. Flex,
that'd be nice.
That would be nice. Flex, Jason Witten. Again, Dak Binky. You know, old man Witten loves it, and this could be his last chance saloon. So expect him to get a lot of the ball and again get in the end zone. And the easiest pick of the week, defense, New England Patriots, who will give up one touchdown to DeAndre Hopkins and not much more.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, a cheaper option for one of your tight end spots may have been Jared Cook. But, you know, ultimately, I don't know what your budget is. But no, it seems a solid team, and ultimately, you're the one winning money at DFS. So who am I to?
This week I've kind of spread the wealth, whereas last week I had Le'Veon Bell. I tried to get Le'Veon Bell in again. He's 10,300 done. That is a vast sum of your money, and I couldn't bring myself to do it because then you're looking at who's playing quarterback. You're going to be putting a backup quarterback in. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you put Le'Veon Bell in, or Antonio Brown, or Tom Brady. Well, Tom Brady's not as much, but if you put one of them two in, or Julio, you're pretty much at that point looking at third string wide receivers and running backs and hoping they get 4 touches.
I mean, you could go for the Houston Texans model of literally not having a quarterback, but I don't think you win much at DFS that way.
Don't think you do, Dutton. Don't think you do. Big weekend of football this week, Dutton. Really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to not watching the Texans-Patriots game live.
That will be a joy. As I say to any Patriots fans, you're on to the championship game, which I don't know. You know, it may be an unfamiliar setting. You may not be used to the big. Oh, what am I talking about? You go every year.
Every bloody year. As my offensive coordinator on our best offense in a long, long time disappears into the ether. At least he didn't call the plays. Although I believe he's taken Wade Phillips with him as defensive coordinator. Fantastic. I wanted him.
Yeah, this is basically Sean McVay, kneeing you in the balls, and then as you go down, quick dig to the back of the head.
Cheers, Sean. Cheers. This has been Wax and Lyrical, and we'll see you next week.